During his studies, he makes note of the fact that not one well-documented source states specifically that the Ark came to rest precisely on Mount Ararat. However, the Bible does state in Genesis 8:4 that the Ark came to rest in the mountains, that's plural, mountains of Ararat. Could it be that the Ark came to rest on a smaller sister mountain of Ararat proper? Have well-intending prior expeditions searched Ararat only because it is the highest point in the area, and as a result, overlooked and neglected other possible landing sites of the Ark? Point by point, Ron begins to build a case for the possibility of the Ark not being on Mount Ararat proper. Due to these conclusions drawn from his extensive research, he is more intrigued than ever concerning the possibilities of the site, which was explored and summarily abandoned by the 1960 expedition.
In 1977, Ron Wyatt made his first trip to this area. It was during this first trip that Ron found numerous huge Drogue-style anchor stones, all the same approximate size as the one here. These were all in direct alignment with the boat-shaped object, evidencing their being cut loose or dropped as the Ark entered the area of its final rest. These bear ancient iconographic inscriptions of the 8 survivors of the flood. In December of 1978, an earthquake in this highly remote area dropped the soil from around the formation, allowing Ron to see for the first time the rib timbers and deck support timbers visibly exposed on the side. A large crack was also formed along the entire length of the object, and he was able to measure the depth and take samples for analysis. Ron saw a very large rock which had crosses carved on it. About 10 feet in height, this stone had a hole on one end. Ron remembered seeing similar objects in an archaeology book that were anchor stones used on ancient ships in the Mediterranean Sea, but this one was many, many times larger. When their guide saw Ron's excitement at seeing this, he showed them several other similar stones in and around his village. Most of them had 8 crosses carved on them in the Byzantine and Crusader styles. For the first time, Ron realized the possibility that the Ark had used such anchors, not for anchoring the ship, but for stabilizing it and holding the nose into the oncoming waves. The crosses on these stones were of the style of ancient Christian Byzantines and Crusaders who were well known for carving crosses on objects they associated with biblical events and places. Did these early Christians connect these stones with the 8 survivors of the flood? The next day, Ron and the boys again began to walk the region. This time, they came upon an ancient stone house, partially collapsed. Its great age could be seen by the fact that the ground level around it had been raised several feet by eroding soil from the surrounding hills. Extending out in all directions around the house was a system of stone fences, also almost buried with only their tops extending above the ground. But most interesting were the 2 stones sitting beside the house, one standing and one lying flat. These also had 8 crosses carved on their faces, but the crosses were carved on top of some earlier pictographs. There was what appeared to be an arch across the top, which Ron believes was a rainbow. Below this were 8 figures walking away from an ocean wave shape, above which sat a boat shape. On the stone lying on the ground, the second figure from the right was a woman. Her head was bowed and her eyes were closed. On the standing stone, both the first figure, which was a man, and the second figure, a woman, both had their eyes closed and their heads bowed. Ron drew an incredible conclusion. He believed these were possibly the tombstones marking Noah and his wife's graves. The wife, he concluded, had died first, and that is why only she was represented with her eyes closed on her stone. When Noah died, his eyes were shown as closed as well as were his wife's. Nearby was a natural amphitheater between two hills with a large stone that appeared to be an altar. Could this possibly be Noah's post-flood home with corrals for breeding various animals and an altar directly behind his house? These were exciting discoveries, but they still hadn't found the boat-shaped object. Finally, the last afternoon they were there, Ron left the boys reading while he made one last search. This time he had the taxi drive in a different direction, south of where they had earlier been. When the taxi had gone as far as it could, he began to walk through the mountains. After a while, he saw the boat-shaped formation directly below him.
In determining precisely where to begin his investigations, Ron approaches the matter differently than his Ark-hunting predecessors. Instead of focusing his search on Mount Ararat, he began with a broader scope of vision. He feels strongly that an occasion as momentous as the landfall of Noah's Ark would be made record of in history and ancient legend by local inhabitants of the region. His insight and intuition were to pay off handsomely. He began by visiting and talking to villagers in the general proximity of the boat-shaped object. After several days of becoming acquainted with them and earning their trust, he gets the needed directions to the general area he has awaited so long to visit. At long last, here is the object which has held his fascination for so many years.
And here we are at last, gazing upon the mortal remains of the great boat that Noah and his family rode to safety.
The site is located approximately 15 miles south of Mount Ararat and is known locally as Doomsday Mountain. The elevation is approximately 6,375 feet above sea level. Ron takes the dimensions of the object and finds it to be approximately 515 feet in length. His data corresponds with the original aerial photo survey and ground measurements which were made by both the Turkish and American teams. The local villagers who have come to know and trust Ron are familiar with every stone, boulder, and canyon of their land. Once again, directions they provide him with lead him to a remarkable series of discoveries. He finds 3 massive anchor-type stones, all approximately 8 feet high and weighing several tons each. All are similar in proportion and design and have 8 distinct crosses which are carved in the stone in a pattern which Ron and other experts believe refer to the 8 survivors of the flood. The placing and alignment on the stones tell of their relationship to Noah and one another. This is called an iconographic representation. Ron elaborates.
Like all the other grave markers in this area, the Valley of the Eight, this marker once had 8 crosses. Now these are a beautiful representation of the ornate Byzantine cross dating back to approximately the 3rd century AD. The large cross representing Noah is especially ornate. The one representing his wife is quite a beautiful design. Now we have the matched pairing here, the eldest son and his wife. These crosses are of the ornate style. We have this cross here that represents one of the sons beyond the first son, and it matches with this one. Up here we have the representation of the other son, but the representation, or the cross representing his wife, is missing and apparently got broken away over the years. The alignment of these stones tell us the direction from which the boat came as it approached and the mountain that it landed on. One of these stones is approximately a quarter of a mile from the boat itself.